Imagine dawn, crawling over a damp field, a pale strip of light, lifting fog from furrows. Roosters argue with each other, like they do every morning. Your bed is straw, your pillow is a bundled tunic that smells like sweat and fire smoke. You get up because the sun says so, not a clock. Your hands know the feel of a hoe before your eyes fully open. Bread, if it's there, tastes like yesterday and the day before. A cough hangs around the village like a stray dog. And then someone hands you a smooth black stone that glows like a trapped star. It hums in your palm. It draws your face closer. Your reflection stares back with soft morning terror. You do not have a word for this. It chirps. You drop it, obviously. The hens panic, and 3 children materialize from nowhere because children appear the moment something breaks or shines. The youngest reaches first. You snatch it back because it's yours now, because you saw your own ghost in it, and that means something. The local reeve shuffles up the road with a ledger, always a ledger, and a pencil stub worn flat by other people's debts. He sees the glow and makes the sign of the cross twice, fast, like maybe speed matters. Someone whispers the word witch. Not at you, exactly. At the air around you. Father Aldrich, who walks with a limp and belief heavy as iron, arrives like a storm cloud. He plants his staff, breathes once, and begins the ritual he uses for cows that won't calve and cradles that rock when no one is pushing them. The black stone answers him with a second chirp, brighter, 2 notes that bounce off the church door. Your neighbor Tom swears he saw an angel once in the barley. He swears again now, loudly, and for once it might be useful. Your thumb, clumsy from cold and callous, slides across the surface and a face opens in the glass. It's your face, but clean, but close, but stranger. You jerk back. Everyone jerks back with you. Then, against the drum of your pulse, a woman's voice spills from the stone like a gentle river that learned to speak. "Hello," she says, clear as bell metal. "How can I help you?" The priest forgets his Latin. Tom drops his hat. The children laugh because the sound tickles something in their ribs that has never been tickled. Delight and fear wrapped together like bread and salt. You whisper, "Are you a saint?" The stone says, "I'm Siri." You do not know a Saint Siri. You ask for the sign of her order. She offers weather tomorrow. You ask again, because weather tomorrow is indeed an order, and saints specialize in rain. The village solves problems with stories. The brewer tells a story about a cat that learned to open doors. The midwife tells a story about a traveler with eyes like knives. And now a story opens about a stone with a voice inside it, a glass egg with a helpful spirit that knows the future of clouds. Father Aldrich is still talking, softly now, to his own faith. He's a good man who fears wrong things at the right moments. He wraps his stole around his wrist like a rope. You find uses almost immediately because peasants are expert improvisers. It becomes a mirror for shaving on saints' days. It becomes a lantern when the wind argues with your candle's flame. It reflects chicken thieves with alarming honesty. Children learn the swipe faster than they learned laces. The stone captures their faces, motion caught, eyes wide, then shows that moment back, trapped but alive. And everyone screams, and then volunteers to scream again. Because the village is a market in disguise, offers arrive. "I will trade you 2 hens," says Tom, "and 1 favor unspecified." The miller, who counts favors like coins, offers flour measured to generosity instead of debt. The Lord Steward arrives on a horse that believes in its own superiority and says the object belongs by rights to the manor, which is how the manor acquires everything interesting. You say this belongs to whoever can make the voice answer questions. The steward frowns because he has never been outbid with literacy. You hold the stone in the square, while the whole village circles like stars in a tired constellation. "Siri," you say, feeling your mouth learn the shape. "What cures cough?" It speaks herbs you've heard of and some you haven't, doses and measures no one uses. It recommends rest, a thing you cannot afford. The midwife tilts her head, listening for both sense and danger. When it says, "boil water," 3 women laugh at once. When it says, "wash hands," a silence falls that has the shape of insult. Then the midwife nods, once, hard. "It's not a devil," she says. Devils don't nag. The blacksmith arrives last. Soot in his eyebrows. The smell of iron like a road after rain. He taps the glass with his knuckle and is impressed that the glass does not care. "Solid," he says, admiring anything that resists fire. He suggests a little frame to wear it on your belt, like a reliquary. The priest bristles. Relics hold bone, not lightning. You say, "This holds stories." That makes even the priest hesitate. At night, you put it on the table, and the room breathes around it. Lice forget to be bold. You learn you can make the stone remember voices, then play them back in the exact shape and skin of the original voice, like a parrot taught by gods. You hear your grandmother laugh, even though she is bones behind the church. You hear yourself talk like you imagine your betters do when you are not around. You feel taller with it, which is how power feels. It's small, which is how power hides. Everyone discovers a favorite function. The weaver likes the way you can pinch and grow a picture, as if wool turned into cloth without your fingers bleeding. The reeve admires the calendar because it never loses a day to ale. The boys learn the torch and spend nights under the hedge, reading each other's faces like maps. Father Aldrich, alone at his desk, whispers, "Siri, what is the proper form for a psalm when the king writes yesterday?" Siri apologizes. She knows a great deal, but not yet the etiquette of kings. Then, the game changes. The black stone is helpful, and also, the black stone contains a door you never meant to open. Somehow, you load a map that shows not just your village, not just your field, but everything, everywhere, like a monk who refused to stop drawing. Roads you haven't walked yet. Cities with names you only know from merchant songs. The sea in a color that feels like a prayer for cool. And a blue dot that says you are here with absolute impolite confidence. People get quiet. Someone starts to cry softly because it is the first time she has been located in a way that isn't by whose daughter she is or what she owes. If the battery were infinite, the world ends and begins in one afternoon. Imagine that. Imagine the map telling the shepherd which hills are wolf-haunted and which valleys are gossip-haunted. Imagine the blacksmith asking for designs of locks, and the stone showing him devices with tolerances like secrets. Imagine the midwife reading a list of herbs and muttering, "We could have saved 3 babies last winter." Imagine a knight sliding a gauntlet finger across a screen and seeing the layout of a rival's fortress. Grim geometry rendered cheerful by a bright palette. Imagine the steward keeping 2 ledgers, one for the Lord and one that the stone's numbers chase until they corner it and demand honesty. Imagine a song crossing the world and coming back in your kitchen the same day. Imagine the price of salt equalized by information alone. Imagine the church, the crown, and the market all inhaling at once. Because knowledge is oxygen, and you just opened a window wide enough to unmake a castle. But we do not live in infinite batteries. We live in candles that gutter. We live in season and chance and small lucks. The stone's light narrows each day like winter gnawing daylight from the calendar. The torch dims faster now. Siri coughs before she speaks, a thin little stutter like a sparrow hitting a pane. You begin rationing glory. You ask fewer questions and you visit fewer pictures, and you look out the actual window more, which is maybe good for you and rough on your curiosity. The midwife wants one more recipe. The weaver wants one more pattern. Father Aldrich wants one more psalm the stone can recite, exactly to hear what perfect sounds like. You want one more map, just to see the sea again. Tell the truth, you are a little in love with this object. Not romantic love, not even sacred love. It is the love you reserve for tools that made your life less cruel. The iron pot, the well when it doesn't freeze, the wool cloak that remembers your shape. You would trade seasons of turnips to keep this light alive. You would trade small sins. You would trade a better confession. But the stone does not negotiate. It dies the way snow melts. Everybody knows it's happening. And still the last patch surprises your toes. The day it finally fails, there's no drama, just a quiet stubbornness that refuses to be coaxed. The voice does not answer. The map remains a frozen fragment of the world's face, one unblinking eye. You gather at the table and speak her name one more time, and the stone keeps its silence, the way churches keep theirs after the last hymn. The priest is gentle in victory. He says perhaps miracles are meant to pass through us, not linger. Perhaps the point was how we used it, not how long. The midwife takes his hand because he is trying. The blacksmith sighs and measures the glass with his eyes, cataloging a mystery he cannot hammer or quench. And yet the story refuses to die with its battery. Culture reverse engineers miracles. The village builds new habits around the absence like scar tissue. The weaver keeps adjusting patterns anyway, her fingers remembering shapes she only glimpsed once. The boys make maps on scraps of parchment with charcoal thumbs, and while they are wrong in every small way, they are correct in the way that matters. They believe more world exists than the lane between church and field. The midwife boils water because a ghost once nagged her into it. Infant coughs relent. She adds rosemary because the ghost suggested it, and now she trusts rosemary like a friend. Some form of church appears anyway because people are gravity to each other. They gather at the hedge and tell the stone's story like a gospel of common sense. Sermons are swapped. Wash your hands. Drink clean water. If the sky looks iron, plant like it will rain anyway. If a man writes your debt in a ledger you never see, write your own beside it. The priest listens, nods where he can, argues where he must, and updates his own sermons with a little more boiled water and a little less thunder. This is not blasphemy. This is maintenance. Consider the alternate tale as a ghost that haunts the edges of this one. Imagine you found a way to keep the light, a tiny river that flowed into the stone forever. Then the village would not learn scar tissue humility. It would learn speed. News would run faster than horses. A rumor could topple a steward before his breakfast. A tax could appear and dissolve between two swipes because the people agreed aloud, together, not to pay it. Knights would text in Latin abbreviations and misspell them. The market would sprout prices and the village would argue, not over whether something was fair, but whether it was trending. Your daughter would ask what a meme is, and you would point to an old woodcut mocking greedy monks and say, "We've always had those, now they just sprint." If you also framed, the Lord, predictably, would ban the glass. He would call it subversive. He would call it foreign. He would call it a mirror that misbehaves. But his son would learn it in secret, seeing a city skyline he cannot inherit light up his room. Merchants would grow sly and fat, and then thin again as competition found even the corners of the map. The scribe would cry, then become the first local blogger, copying ideas into notes he nails to doors with gentle explosion. The sheriff would confiscate 5 stones and keep 1, because hypocrisy runs faster than any plague. And Siri? Siri would become an oracle with parish boundaries. The oracle of the North Field recommends peas in April. The oracle of the Tanner's Lane says vinegar prevents stink. The oracle of the mill disputes both, asks for a software update, receives a prayer instead. You would attend a festival where people gather to ask the oracles questions all day, and the most useful answers would be the boring ones, and the most popular answers would be the spectacularly wrong ones. That is how humans behave under any sky. Love finds a way into this story because it crawls into all stories. A girl in one village sends a voice note to a boy 2 valleys over. His reply gets stuck in the ether and arrives 3 days late. She has already promised to dance with someone else at the harvest. They talk anyway for a winter, trading recipes and rumors and confessions too small for a priest's ear. In the spring, he walks the map she described to him months before and finds her by a stream that looks exactly like the picture she sent, except the sun is kinder. They marry without asking Siri's advice, and it works the old-fashioned way: trial and error and grace. There is crime, too, because abundance attracts thieves like butter attracts flies. A man pretends to be a messenger from the crown, collects 5 silver pieces to arrange a pardon that never solidifies. Another sells a fake stone, cleverly weighted, with a portrait painted into the glass so convincingly that the victim believes the device died while smiling at him. Father Aldrich devises confessions tailored to fraud. The blacksmith invents locks that don't fear clever fingers. The reeve writes a new column in his ledger called Foolishness and finds it difficult to keep the numbers straight because the column grows like ivy. Old knowledge refuses extinction. The shepherd still smells rain before anyone else. The midwife still tells when a baby will be born by how a mother looks at bread. The way you can tell a bad man from the way he ties his shoes doesn't require a glowing prophecy. People still raise barns faster than any single person could imagine, because cooperation is the oldest app you ever downloaded and forgot to delete. The battery death version of the story makes you scrappier. The infinite battery version makes you louder. In one timeline, the stone becomes legend. In the other, it becomes furniture. In both, the truest change occurs in your head when you understand that your village sits on a planet and the planet sits in a universe, and maps can be drawn even when the lamp is out. Once you know that distance is walkable in theory, you walk more in practice. Once your son has zoomed a picture of the sea, he decides to see it before he dies. When he does, 30 years later, he says it looks almost like the picture, only bigger, only louder, only better, because it tastes like salt and not pixels. Centuries take their level tax. The stone, buried beneath the threshold where hands could still find it sometimes like a lucky coin, waits. The house becomes boards, then dust, then dirt that remembers nothing of dinner, but everything of weight. One day, a man with gloves and a soft brush uncovers the glass. He is an archaeologist, which in your time is a word no one would need. Everyone already knows where their dead things are. He lifts the artifact into a sky threaded with jet trails and satellite scars and says, "Look what they had." His colleague laughs. "They had everything," she says. "For a minute, back in the village. That was, your grandchildren tell the story around winter fires when breath paints the air with little ghosts. They add jokes that did not happen and cut the quiet you remember best, because every generation edits. The moral changes depending on who holds the spoon while the soup simmers. Sometimes the point is that magic requires maintenance. Sometimes the point is that people will always find a way to put a crown on anything that shines. Sometimes the point is that washing hands saves more lives than miracles. All of these are true enough to warm fingers. If a traveler came today and asked what you learned, you would hand them a cup before an answer. Hospitality is older than novelty. You would tell them that the stone taught you to trust simple advice that costs nothing. Boil the water. Write your own numbers. Ask 3 people before you act. Teach children to be curious on purpose, not by accident. Make a map, even a wrong one, so you have something to argue with besides your neighbor. When you cannot afford spectacle, cultivate attention. When you cannot afford speed, cultivate patience. When you cannot afford either, cultivate each other. You still dream sometimes that the stone wakes again. In the dream, the voice returns, frail but game, like a grandmother climbing a hill with a basket. "How can I help you?" Siri asks. You do not waste the question. You ask, "How do we help each other when the light goes out?" And she says what she always said if you listened past the fancy. Together, and with water, and with clean hands, and with numbers everyone can see, and with stories that do not lie. If that sounds like something you could have learned without a miracle, you are paying attention. The glow was not the gift. The gift was the permission you gave yourselves to be curious. Curiosity is a key that fits an infinite number of doors, and none of those doors require a charger. The stone made you brave for a season. Practice makes you brave for good. When spring comes, you walk to the field with the same old tools and a new habit of counting clouds. You hum a song that traveled to you from far away once, and you keep humming, and the song becomes yours, because that is how music works. The priest blesses the furrows without scowling at the bucket of boiled water nearby. The midwife laughs at nothing and everything. The blacksmith forges a buckle with a window of thick glass, a quiet homage. The boys argue about whether the world is round or simply complicated. The girls roll their eyes and run faster, because tomorrow is planting, and they want one more race before mud owns their ankles. A traveler passes through 6 weeks later with a mirror for sale. It's just a mirror. The village crowds anyway, in case the glass has a trapped saint. It does not. But faces gleam in it, and you see the way people lean toward their own reflections with a new kindness, as if remembering that they looked into a small bright thing once and felt both judged and seen and forgiven. The mirror sells for too much, and no one regrets it. In the evening, everyone shares the mirror until the moon climbs into its own. If a different traveler comes with a newer stone, a thinner one that sings and dances of its own accord, the village will handle it better. They will ask better questions. They will assign a schedule: Tuesdays for the weaver, Thursdays for the boys, Sundays for Father Aldrich, whose sermons have become suspiciously practical. They will hold meetings about recipes and rumors. They will let the midwife go first when they ask about coughs. They will not let the Lord Steward walk off with it. They will hide it less and use it more. They will boil the water whether it glows or not. Sometime in late summer, when wheat combs itself gold and shadows stretch like cats in doorways, you sit on a fence and watch swifts carve calligraphy in the air. You imagine overlaying a map on the sky. You imagine drawing lines between the birds and calling it a constellation, even though it will never be the same again. You imagine the stone in your palm again, warm with captured day, and then you let the thought pass through you like wind through a shirt hung to dry. That is the skill you learned last, to hold wonder lightly enough that it does not bruise, tightly enough that it does not blow away. A child asks you, "What did the voice sound like?" You say, "Like water deciding where to go." They nod, as if that explains everything, because childhood is fluent in metaphor. Another child asks, "Did it love us?" You consider the absurdity and then answer in the only way that matters. "We loved each other better while it was here," you say. "And we kept doing that after." The children accept this as a yes. When night falls, you place a candle on the table where the stone used to sit. People laugh and accuse you of sentiment. You say, "It's a good place for light." No one can argue. Someone tells a joke about a knight trying to airdrop a duel invitation to a monk who has his device set to contacts only. Someone else says the monk declined anyway. On principle, laughter stitches the room together like careful thread. You will forget pieces. That's natural. You will misremember the date, the season, whether the hens stopped laying for a week or 3. The broad shape will hold. A village met a small miracle, learned a big lesson, and went on. If history had a comment section, it would be full of people insisting you invented the whole thing and others insisting you misunderstood the point. You do not answer. You have fences to mend and herbs to dry and a pot to mind. And still, when the wind comes from the east and slips under the door like a sly traveler, you sometimes think you hear a tiny voice asking if it can help. You smile and answer out loud, put on the kettle, wipe the table, count the apples, be kind, and you carry on, which is the oldest technology you know.